Louisiana now, and you're seeing Mrs. Bobby Jindal, who's getting ready to introduce her husband. He's made the announcement on Twitter already, but today the big announcement, he will be running for president. And in fact, he even included a little clip where he was telling his kids that if he got their support for the run, they could have a puppy. Interesting that he's the governor now and a big policy maker, but trying to get some attention by really moving toward the right, becoming very conservative in recent weeks and in recent months, trying to win some of that support. Crowded field, he becomes now the 13th GOP presidential candidate.
My name is Bobby Jindal. I am governor of the great state of Louisiana, and I am running for president of the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. "44 years ago, a young couple who had never before been on an airplane, they left their home on the other side of the world to come to a place called America. They had never seen it. There was no internet to search, but they had heard the legend. There was a place in this world where people were free and the opportunities were real. They weren't really coming to a geographical place. They were coming to an idea, and that idea is America. To them, America represented all that was good in the world, where you could get ahead if you worked hard and played by the rules. A place where what matters is the content of your character, not the color of your skin, the zip code you were born in, or your family's last name. My dad grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. He was the only person in the family to get past the 5th grade. He and Mom, they came to Louisiana because they believed in America. And when they got here, they found that the legend was true. They found that the people of Louisiana accepted them. And they found that America is indeed the land of the free and the home of the brave. "37 years later, my parents' eldest son became governor of Louisiana. It was the aftermath of Katrina. Our economy was locked in a downward spiral. Our biggest city was reeling. For 25 straight years, more people had left this state than had moved into it. Louisiana was in big trouble. So we had to make big changes. We had to believe in Louisiana again, and that is exactly what we did. We reformed our ethics laws. We went from one of the worst states to one of the best states in the country. We privatized our outdated government-run hospital system. We reformed education with nearly 100% charter schools in New Orleans. And now we have statewide school choice because every child deserves an equal opportunity for a great education. Instead of the child following the dollars, we made the dollars follow the child because we trust the parents, not the bureaucrats, to make the best decisions for their kids. We did what they said could not be done. We shrank our government. We cut our budget by 26%. We cut the number of government bureaucrats by more than 30,000. Now, it wasn't easy. The big government crowd fought us every step of the way. They protested, they filibustered, they even took us to court, but in the end, we won. Today, we have more people moving into Louisiana than out of it, our highest population in history. Our kids are coming home. And now we have more people working than at any time in our state's history, with the highest incomes in our state's history. A job for your family, a paycheck in your mailbox. They're the ultimate proof that your state is doing things right. But of course, there's another side to the story. The big government crowd, they hate what we have done. They say that we have cut the government more than anyone. The government budgets are always running low on funds with me in the governor's office. My response to the big government crowd is simply this: yes. I am guilty as charged, and our state is better off for it today. It's time for the folks in Washington to admit the truth. You can't grow the economy and the government at the same time. It is an either-or choice. Now, Hillary Clinton, she wants to grow the government in Washington. We want to grow the real economy out here in America. Here's the key difference. Democrats evaluate success in terms of the prosperity of government. We define success in terms of the prosperity of our people. My approach is different from most of the other people running for president. The United States of America was made great by people who get things done, not lots of talk or entertaining speeches. Oh, to be sure, there are a lot of great talkers running for president already, but none of them, not one, can match our record of actually shrinking the size of government. If great speeches helped our country, we'd be on Easy Street right now. The guy in the White House today, he's a great talker. We have a bunch of great talkers running for president. We've had enough of talkers. It is time for a doer. I'm not running for president to be somebody. I'm running for president to do something. Oh, it's easy to talk about the mess that Obama has made of our country. Every American knows about it. Every Republican candidate talks about it. That's not even half of what we should expect from our next president. We owe voters more than just a tirade about the problem. We owe them honesty about our solution. I will do the things that you cannot do in Washington. I will say the things you cannot say. I served 2 terms in Congress. I can tell you how it works in Washington. If you want to be with the cool kids, if you want to be liked by the media, if you want to be invited to the right cocktail parties, you have to accept there are things in Washington you just cannot do. They say you cannot reduce the size of government or the number of bureaucrats. Oh, you might be able to cut the rate of increase here and there. But they say you cannot actually cut government spending. But we can and we will. They say the $18 trillion national debt can't really be addressed. It's just a part of doing business, so it's better not to talk about it. But we can and we will. They know Social Security and Medicare are going bankrupt, but they're afraid to do anything about it. So they deny the math, they pretend everything is fine. But we can reform and save these programs, and we will. In Washington, they say term limits is a quaint idea that we are naive to believe in. They think we need a permanent class, a ruling class of elites. It's safer to not rock the boat. But we can rock the boat, and we will rock the boat. In Washington, they know the voters want the border secured, but they refuse to do it. But you and I can, and we will secure our border. Finally, they say we can't really repeal and replace all of Obamacare. But I'm the only candidate who has written a replacement plan, a free market plan that focuses on reducing costs. We can repeal Obamacare, and we will repeal Obamacare. But today's Republican Party in Washington, D.C. has been beaten into submission. It is increasingly afraid to speak the truth. It's time to say what everybody is already thinking. The emperors in Washington, they're not wearing any clothes. In case it's not clear by now, I am running for president without permission from headquarters in Washington, D.C. But rest assured, I am tanned, rested, and ready for this fight. Here's the truth about most politicians. They're selfish. They're followers, not leaders. They worry more about their own fate than the country's fate. They take polls, they figure out where the public is headed, they run out front, they pretend to be leading the parade. It's easy to be a popular politician. Don't rock the boat. Kiss a bunch of babies, cut ribbons, don't make big changes. But I'm not going to take the easy way out. If you want somebody who's just going to pretend that everything is fine, just make some small tweaks, then you want somebody else. I'll make this promise to you. I will never lead from behind. I know that some believe that I talk about my faith too much, but I will not be silenced. I will not be silenced in order to meet their expectations of political correctness. They don't seem to accept the idea that you can be both intellectual and Christian. They can't fathom the notion that you can be both smart and conservative. They need to get out more. There's a big country out here with millions of Americans who believe in God and are not ashamed to say so. I'd be wary of a president who didn't seek wisdom from the Almighty. I don't know about you. I've met many smart people who lack wisdom. Yet Christianity, it is under assault today in America. The liberals, they have forgotten.
Well, the third most frequent question on Google this week concerning Bobby Jindal was, is Bobby Jindal Christian? And there you heard the GOP governor turned GOP presidential candidate say loudly and rather proudly that indeed he is a Christian. He just didn't do it in a declarative way. This follows up on a tweet he had earlier today announcing that he would be a candidate for the GOP nomination for the presidential race. And with his wife standing behind him and, in fact, introducing him, he laid out the things that he's done for his home state of Louisiana and what he plans to do for the country, including much smaller government. He says he won't make minor tweaks, that he's planning an overhaul. In his words, he says he's ready to rock the boat. Well, ask previous presidents how easy it is to rock the boat in a place like Washington, D.C., where Congress has its own ideas and where people from other parties might have problems with executive orders and actions taken when you plan to rock the boat. And you might see that Bobby Jindal would have an uphill climb. He also has an uphill climb on the political front, because right now, in a field of 13 Republican candidates, he would be dead last, according to a poll with Real Clear Politics. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me from that organization. She covers politics for Real Clear Politics. And Eliana Johnson is with the National Review in Washington, D.C. Ladies, great to see you both today. Thank you so much for your time. Let's talk a little bit here, Caitlin, about the uphill climb that he has. In Louisiana, he's seeing an all-time low. Last month in May, 31% of his home state approved of the job he was doing. To put that into a little bit of perspective, President Obama lost Louisiana in 2012 by 17%. And yet President Obama is more popular in Louisiana than Bobby Jindal is.
It's remarkable. And keep in mind, too, we just had a midterm election, which Mary Landrieu, the longtime Democratic senator, lost by a wide margin as well. Bobby Jindal is not popular at home. His fall has been really remarkable. He came in 2008 as the governor. He was reelected 4 years later with 66% of the vote. He was thought of as this Republican Party rising star. And some of the things that he's done in Louisiana are not popular. He's come into confrontation with Republicans and Democrats over the budget most recently. And people in the state have seen him as having national ambitions taking priority to those in Louisiana.
In fact, back then in 2009, GOP, the Washington Post said he's the GOP's anointed boy wonder. Eliana, what happened since then?
I think what you've seen is Jindal try to rebrand himself from the party's leading policy wonk to its leading provocateur. But temperamentally, Jindal is really more of a wonk, and so it's sort of an odd fit. And I think it's made for a little bit of discomfort for Jindal on the national stage. You know, he's a Rhodes Scholar. He ran the Department of Health and Human Services in Louisiana at the age of 24. And that's not really the sort of person that you expect to be the champion of the Duck Dynasty and the person to be name-checking his fellow GOP candidates in a presidential announcement, which is what he's done today. And so I think he's struggling with really what his political identity is going to be, and he struggled to really garner electricity on the national stage.
You know, I know there's probably a lot of conservative voters who think, I don't want to be lumped in with the Duck Dynasty group, and I don't care about who you want to have a beer with. What I care is about a policy wonk. But can a policy wonk win?
It's hard to penetrate. I mean, think about, you mentioned how many candidates are running. Bobby Jindal makes 13. So you have to find a place within the primary to operate. And that's a great point. He's found this place cultivating kind of evangelical, religious conservatives, which is not necessarily, doesn't seem, at least from what we've seen before, as his natural fit. Those are the votes he's going for.
And he's doing that, and some critics would just say pandering for that kind of vote against people who do it very well. Are people with a natural affinity for those votes just going to blow somebody like Jindal out of the water?
It'll be really interesting to see how he does in Iowa and New Hampshire. I talked to his campaign today, and they said those are the two states that they really have to. It's make or break. Iowa especially, he has to do well. The problem is, as you mentioned, there are several candidates running in that lane for that vote. People like Rick Santorum, people like Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee, who have built up that following over the past several years.
Yeah, but Eliana, I know that there are differences from the people who run the Republican Party. They say, look, we have got to attract more diversity. We need more women. We need more young people. We need more minorities. And Bobby Jindal might appeal to those voters more than a traditional white, hardcore Christian family values type of candidate. When you go to Iowa, when you go to New Hampshire, is that what voters are thinking too? Oh, right, this guy brings some diversity to the table.
One of Jindal's great advantages, I think, is that he's tremendously smart and indisputably smart, and he's also not white. And so I think the other thing he's done, in addition to those qualities, is he's laid out very specific and detailed policy proposals. And those three things together, I think, will make him a force in this race, regardless of the other more explosive things he says.
You say not white. He calls himself tan, whatever. The top questions here about Bobby Jindal this week: where was Bobby Jindal born? What nationality is Bobby Jindal? Is Bobby Jindal Christian? I mentioned that. Is Bobby Jindal running for president? When is Bobby Jindal's term over? Who is Bobby Jindal? Is that something that the voters are going to have to decide and find out for themselves, and very quickly in a very crowded field?
Absolutely. Well, I think the last question that you asked is perhaps the most interesting, because Jindal just hasn't registered on the national scene for most people, and the job of his campaign is going to be to introduce him on the national stage broadly. He's barely at 1% in the polls, which means people really just don't know him, since the polls are mostly name recognition. But who is he? Is he the policy wonk and the rising star in the Republican Party, or is he the provocateur who's going to be battling with Ted Cruz for the most conservative people in this race?
And you know
I
what?
think they haven't answered that question.
And we're still
really
waiting to hear for sure whether Chris Christie from New Jersey, again a governor who weathered the storm quite literally with Hurricane Sandy, and Scott Walker, who weathered a very different kind of storm with the unions in Wisconsin and came out on top, whether they will enter the race. So let's just say that they do. A crowded field of 15. And here's Bobby Jindal, who's not doing well in his home state, which other governor, Chris Christie's not doing well in his home state either, number one, but is not breaking through in a very crowded field. Is he just running for vice president? Is that the job he's really after now?
Well, you also have to think about he's at the end of his term. He's term limited. He's young. He's only 44. This is the viable next step for him.
Well, whoever becomes the GOP candidate, this would not be a bad choice, right, for a running mate?
It could be. And
am I getting ahead of myself?
Well, we're thinking of all these candidates in terms of their motives, which is a good question, because there are so many, and a lot of them know that they don't really have long-term viability. But there are vice presidential candidates. There are, cabinet positions. There are a whole host of TV hosting jobs. There are a host of things that Republicans
and he
could
already
do.
served as Secretary of the State Department of Health, so he has some experience, at least in something that maybe could end up as a cabinet level job. Let's talk a little bit about what's motivating him. You said that he's term limited, so clearly politics in Louisiana, unless as becoming senator or something like that.
Right. Well, I think that the thing about Bobby Jindal, too, is that he has been considered this rising star for a long time. He's been very ambitious, as we've seen discussed how fast he's risen.
Do you guys have that piece of tape where that he released today, where we're talking about his kids and whether they're going to support him? Is that something that we could play? He sent out this tweet to say, yes, he's running for president. What do you think? Can we? Oh, we don't have it. Well, let's see if we can get it. But at any rate, he asks his family, can we get your support? Are you willing to put your support behind Dad? If you put your support behind Dad, we'll give you a puppy. Does that kind of thing really speak to voters? Does it win him a little more attention on a day when we're looking at politics in a lot of different ways?
I think the intent was to kind of introduce him and introduce his family. The video was a little bit strange. I mean, it was shot from a tree, I think.
Like a stalker was sitting in this tree.
So I don't think they achieved what they wanted to. But again, Bobby Jindal is going to have to go to all these counties in Iowa and all these other places to really introduce himself. And that's really hard to do when you have more than a dozen candidates doing the same thing.
Eliana, the poll that I'm looking at right here, and it comes from Caitlin's organization, Real Clear Politics, has Jeb Bush as the clear leader right now, but followed in a close second place by Scott Walker, who's not even entered the race. What does that tell you about the kind of competition Bobby Jindal's facing, the kind of uphill climb he's facing for attention?
I actually think the polls right now are mostly just a measure of name recognition. But that being said, Jindal is going to have a tremendously difficult time getting attention because he's been on the national stage more or less for 8 years already as governor, and he's still not breaking through in these polls. He really should be registering, and he's not. So I think that's should be a concern for his campaign. And you mentioned the video he released earlier and the sort of awkwardness about it, and I think it really suggested Jindal isn't great at the theater of politics.
Before you give your reaction to it, because I'm so excited to share this, let me play it, and then we'll come back and talk on the other side.
Okay, if we move into the White House, you can have a puppy.
Really? Yay!
But
Can I bring out the puppy?
but two
I know I can help you. Wait, we need some conditions here.
wait, two conditions. Two conditions. One, you have to take care of the puppy better than you took care of the fish, or all those frogs we had. How many times we chase your frogs in the mansion?
Lizards too.
And lizards, that's right. We're not chasing after some dog, and so you have to take care of them.
Awkward. What did you think, Eliana?
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, and you look at some of Jindal's competitors, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. These are people who really understand the theater of politics. And the fact that it's a really important aspect of being a presidential candidate, capturing people's attention. And I think that video suggests that this isn't something that Jindal's extraordinary at. And to be honest, it's not something wonks are extraordinary at.
But it is giving me some ideas about things that I could do to keep an eye on my kids and places where I could put the GoPro if you want to get...
parenting infomercial, yeah.
You know what? You glean whatever information that you can from that particular moment. When we're talking about campaigning at this point, is it too early to break away from the pack to take an... I mean, when you're looking at a horse race, sometimes the guys who break away from the pack early are not the guys who win in the end.
Right, and we saw in the last election, the polls went up and down, and I think Eliana makes a great point. It is very early on. People have not started to campaign in earnest, really. I mean, we still have candidates to get into the race. But a lot of this now is meeting voters one-on-one, really seeing how you can make an impact in different ways. I think we'll see a lot with social media this cycle. We'll see a lot of these candidates try to branch out.
Why hold off at this point? I mean, if Chris Christie, if Scott Walker are thinking about running, doesn't a delay just get in the way?
It's based on money now. These candidates have super PACs that allow them to raise and spend unlimited amounts of money. They can kind of build up their campaigns that way, and so that when they do officially announce and can't coordinate with those PACs anymore, they can, present this heft.
You know, Eliana, I was just talking to a big GOP contributor the other day who said he's holding back on donating to these campaigns until the field shakes out a little bit, because the donors say, I just don't want to waste my money.
I think you're going to see a lot of that, and I think there remain a tremendous number of undecided Republican donors who want to see how these guys can perform on the campaign trail. And it's still very early on, which is why I think the polls remain a bit meaningless, and we have to see the durability of these people. It doesn't matter who's out front right now. The debates only start in August, and that's when things will really get underway.
Is there any point when you're pulling in, here we have Bobby Jindal, and again, I'm focused on the Real Clear Politics poll because you're sitting with me, Caitlin. Bobby Jindal with 0.8% support right now as it stands, less than 1%. What else could be motivating him? Because look at this field. When we put up the candidates, you can't even recognize them because there's so many.
Well, if you think about it, there's really nowhere for him to go but up, so that might be part of the strategy. But Eliana brought up the debates. As we know, the first debate is limiting the primetime stage to the top 10 candidates based on national polls. And that's problematic for the Republican Party in a variety of ways. One is that it potentially excludes the diversity that they want to show in the form of Bobby Jindal, in the form of Carly Fiorina, the only woman running.
Right, because as it stands right now, Fiorina and Jindal would not be on that stage.
Right, exactly. So they're going to have to, if they want to be in that primetime spot, fight their way up. And by the way they do that is to make an impression somehow. So I think we're going to see these candidates, very loud, very aggressive.
So is that a
more so than we
mistake for
have
the GOP organizers?
Before. It's been a big problem for them. They've tried to limit the number of debates to avoid this kind of clown car show as they described that they had before. The problem is now they have so many candidates running. So they have to divide the field in some way. National polls, there is no national primary. I mean, we vote in the early states. So the campaigns argue that the polls in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and others are more indicative of where the field is.
I think it's worth noting, the person who really screwed up these early debates is Donald Trump, because the party faces a tremendous problem when Donald Trump is going to be on that debate stage, but say the governor of Louisiana or the governor of Ohio isn't going to be on that stage. And I think the party is really going to face a problem with the candidates and voters being tremendously confused about why that is and potentially just looking ridiculous.
Well, when you make it a popularity contest, which if you're going on the basis of polls leading into your first debate, that's essentially what it is. That's what you end up with. Eliana Johnson at the National Review, she's the Washington editor there, and Caitlin Huey-Burns, national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. What a great, fascinating conversation, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thanks.